Welcome to the Hanulia Show.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Julia.
And together we make
Hanulia.
This episode is a very special episode.
Tonight we'll be giving you the Sweet 16
of pranking tips.
So, grab a notebook
and a pen
and get ready to learn from the best. Alright, we're going to be counting down the tips, starting with tip number 16.
Tip number 16 is...
always have a place to get your shit together.
For example, like a parking lot, or even maybe a
church. Parking lot of a church, great place. Not in the church, just the parking lot.
In fact, that's our most recommended place.
It is. And make sure it's close to your pranking location.
Like 2-3 miles away.
Yeah, that way you just go, get everything together. If you need to switch drivers, you can do that then.
Or prepare your pranking materials.
Exactly. And if it says no trespassing, probably not a good idea to do that. But,
however, you can just say, I don't speak English.
No habla inglés. Sorry.
Or any other language you prefer to use.
Yeah.
And this has been tip number 16. Tip number 15 in our countdown is don't have bad luck charms around.
For example, a sister 2 years younger than you that always seems to bring bad luck every time she comes along.
However, this is not limited to sisters. It could be black cats or rabbit's feet that are unlucky.
Voodoo dolls.
Or anything else that could possibly be cursed. Like socks. Or pizza.
Yeah, just make sure they don't get you almost caught, almost killed. Stink up your car full of stuff they spilled.
Or just overall make the time horrible.
Yeah, don't bring them around.
Yeah.
Just eliminate them.
Just completely take them out.
out.
And you know who they or what that is.
Yeah. Think about it. Don't bring them. No matter how much you like them, don't bring them.
And this concludes tip number 15.
Tip number 14 is make sure your car has a sunroof.
Sunroofs can prove to be very useful and helpful when pulling off just that perfect prank.
If you don't have time to stop and get out of your car and do the prank, then you can just have your friend hang out the sunroof and throw, let's say, a massive bag of flour.
Or sugar.
Or eggs.
Or anything else that you could possibly want to lob at the person or thing you do not like.
Then just, you can just throw it out the sunroof as you're driving by. Bam, bam, bam.
At a slow pace, everybody wins and no one has to get caught.
It's also great for yelling at sexy men you pass, like, I like 'em big, I like 'em chunky,
or sexy can I? Anything you can think of.
Pretty much. It just works great.
And if you want to be perverted or extremely clean, it doesn't matter because you're drawing attention to yourself by hanging out the sunroof.
Yeah, works great.
And this concludes tip number 14. Tip number 13 in our countdown is judge your distance well.
What this means is don't park your car a mile from the scene you're going to prank. Make sure it's just around the corner.
Or just around some trees or hid behind another vehicle.
Yeah, and also, if you were, say, you're going to go steal your guidance counselor's newspaper by leaving another friend's house to go there, make sure that you drive your car to the house instead of walking, let's say, 2 miles.
In the freezing cold, one direction.
Barefoot, hold on. Yeah.
This proves that just because you think it's a good idea in the moment, this tip leads to another tip later down the road. But always judge your distance, is whether you're walking, driving, throwing things, or stealing items.
Yeah.
Which we do not promote.
No, do not steal. Stealing is bad.
And a felony.
Yes.
And this concludes tip number 13.
Alright, tip number 12 is to make people think that you are someone who you really aren't.
For example, wear big baggy clothes or stand extremely close to another person.
That way, in case the people see you,
they might think you're a big scary man.
Driving a red car when the car's really orange.
Or someone big and chunky.
I like 'em big.
I like 'em chunky.
This concludes tip number 12.
Tip number 11 in our countdown is always have a good way of communication.
For example, a headset for your cell phone is always a good option.
And a great way to hide this way of communication is through a super cool jacket that looks like a spy would wear.
Black, definitely.
Always go with black.
With lots of pockets.
And zipper pockets.
And always test your headphone before you set off into the woods.
Exactly. Or into any other areas, in fact, you might want to go.
Yeah.
This communication will help you keep up with the people who are probably driving the getaway car or who are just sitting back laughing at you as you perform whatever choice of prank you go with.
Yeah. And this is great, so in case the people driving happen to drive off without you, you can contact them.
Or contact someone else and go beat them up.
Yes.
And this concludes tip number 11.
All right. Tip number 10 is don't drive past the scene of the crime after you've already pranked them.
This can turn out to be a horrible idea, especially if your prank is one that is loud.
For example, if you are driving away and your best friend says, let's go back and see what we did. And you say, no, let's not.
And your friend insists and begins to scream and punch you
Punch
to keep going
hard.
back.
Then even if you're like, no, I don't think it's a good idea, I have a really bad feeling about this,
it can be best to go with your friend who is saying not to go back idea.
Yeah. So even if you do give in to your friend because she's punching you as hard as she can,
or he,
then you're most likely to get caught. Say, for example, you've finally turned around to go see it, to pacify your friend, and the person you have just pranked is out in their driveway,
looking at the damage to what has been done.
And you just come around the curb and happen to see them.
You have nothing left to do but to throw the car in reverse that you can't find and floor it and try to get out of there as quick as possible, probably in the dark.
This brings us actually to tip number 9.
Tip number 9 on our countdown is do not run over emo kids or any other people that might be in the road when you're trying to get away.
This has to do with the tip before this. Don't go back to the scene of the crime, because when you're trying to make a getaway, when that person came out and saw you, there may be some random emo kid in the road.
And you can't see them because they wear dark colors and like to cut themselves.
And when you were flying backwards at like 50 miles an hour, swerving all over the place,
you can't see them.
Poor kid.
Poor kid. This concludes
tip number 9. Tip number 8 is bigger is always better.
This comes in handy when using the let's use a condom on the tailpipe prank.
Make sure you don't get extra small because they don't fit over the tailpipes.
They're just not big enough. You have to get the extra large or it just won't work. This also is possible with using pumpkins to explode
in people's yards.
It also works. The bigger, the better.
Yeah. This concludes tip number 8.
Tip number 7 in our countdown is don't get chased by crazy dogs.
For example, if you are walking up to a house to go prank them and you hear a deep man's voice saying, "What are you doing?"
followed by
and then you hear that deep voice again saying, "Go get him!"
Then it's in your best interest to run as fast as you possibly can and go back to our previous tips and know exactly where your getaway car is through good communication.
And don't sprain your ankle while running.
Or diving into the car.
Yeah.
And this concludes tip number 7.